Right, I think we'll get going, and those that can join us, obviously as it's going on. Um, Thank you everyone for joining this afternoon. This is the third session of the Journey to Net Zero Skills for Growth hosted webinars. And this session is on engaging your workforce and introducing climate policies. Now, Skills for Growth, if you are not already aware, is the program which is hosting the webinars today. And if you're not already familiar with the Skills for Growth program, we are a program designed to increase growth and productivity across businesses in Manchester for small to medium sized organisations. Now, what we do and how we support businesses is that we assess skills gaps in your organisation, and we map out where people might be best aligned for training and support that is going to make an impact to the business growth and productivity. We research and broker training and skills development on behalf of your business and employees, and help match you up with the right training for your staff required in the organisation. We get access to over 500 courses which are fully funded, with things like digital marketing, social media, customer service, leadership training. There is a whole host of different courses available. So if you are not already on the Skills for Growth program, we can provide details about how to access this and the support after this session as well. But first, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca Bowcock and Carl Hirst, who are going to talk about engaging your workforce and introducing climate policies. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the third webinar of 4 in the Cut Carbon, Cut Cost series. This series is a whistle-stop tour, an introduction to some of the themes associated with environmental sustainability and energy efficiency. This third session will help you with some ideas on how to engage your workforce in sustainability and show you how to develop an environmental policy and use it to benefit the business. Presentation will be around 35 minutes long, with 10 minutes left at the end to discuss any thoughts or questions. And just to let you know, the webinar is being recorded, and if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat as we go along, or we will have time at the end for you to ask anything in person. Seems to be a bit slow in. There we go. Today's presenters are myself, Carl Hirst, and my colleague Bex Bowcock. We're both sustainability and net zero advisors with the Business Growth Hub. I'll be starting by looking at engaging your workforce in sustainability, and then Bex will show you how to develop an environmental policy. I'll start by introducing what we do in the sustainability and net zero team. The Sustainability and Net Zero Service helps businesses to minimise inefficiencies within their operations and quantify and reduce their carbon emissions. We offer on-site resource efficiency reviews and one-to-one support to help identify opportunities and quantify cost and carbon savings. We also help businesses to calculate their carbon footprint and develop an action plan to improve. We can help you build a business case for investment in low carbon technologies and help you to develop an environmental strategy. And we can support you to implement projects, find local suppliers of green technologies and access funding. We also run a programme of webinars similar to this one called Journey to Net Zero. It's longer and goes into more depth, and is for businesses that would like to improve sustainability and don't know where to start. And there's a link to our services in the slide pack. The benefits of having a workforce that is motivated by sustainability are: staff feel more involved in the business, they contribute ideas and are positive about change. This leads to some quick and easy wins, which reinforces that motivation. This motivation and positivity can help with managing change and developing new ideas in other areas of your business. Engaging with staff can bring its own rewards. Energy savings from positive implementation of changes and staff ideas can easily lead to cost and carbon savings of over 10%. But remember to continually reinforce the sustainability message to embed the culture change within your business. What areas can staff realistically influence? These are some fairly simple ideas, similar to what the government are encouraging us to do at home. Switching equipment off, for example, lighting, heating, cooling, and IT equipment. Not overriding controls, for example, thermostats, and don't bring in your own heaters or fans into the workplace. Oil fill radiators, for example, are often left switched on overnight or over the weekend as they're silent and you don't know that they're turned on. Last one to leave and first one in procedures or checklists for switching equipment on and off. Not over-ordering materials that can't be used. Using recycling bins correctly. A good idea is to put the mixed-use bin furthest away as it greatly increases recycling. And business travel and commuting travel choices. Looking now at people or technology solutions. People-focused solutions can be low cost, but ongoing support and reinforcement are needed to maintain savings. For example, putting a switch off notice over light switches. After a couple of weeks, people don't even see the sign. Low carbon technology solutions have an upfront capital cost, but then provide reliable savings. By installing controls, for example, passive infrared or light sensors, timers or thermostats. Usually, combined solutions are needed to maximize any benefits. Train the staff to use technology properly and monitor usage and savings. You can also use incentives to help you maintain those savings. Leadership support is vital to the success of carbon and cost reduction projects. If staff see that owners and managers are committed, then it is much more likely that they will be engaged in the processes too. Your success in cutting carbon and costs will ultimately benefit everyone in the business. So it's important that business leaders care about the company's carbon footprint and show that commitment consistently. You may have to sell the benefits to management, so it's important to put it in language that they understand. For example, comply with environmental legislation and reduce business risk. Reducing energy costs improves profitability, and demonstrating environmental commitment gives us a marketing edge. Not only that, but additional benefits such as improved quality, reduction in rejects, increased operational efficiency and reduced downtime. These are some of the things that can influence owners and managers to support you in cutting carbon and costs. It's important to understand the culture of your workforce, as a culture determines behaviour. If your staff tend to keep their heads down and only focus on their own tasks, they may not realise the wider impacts that they could have. Most people like to fit in and don't like change. So try to identify your key influencers. Who do your staff look up to? Also, consider the influence of your customers. What do they want to see from you? Find out who's interested in climate change and environmental issues. Do you have any staff with a personal interest in the environment? Who are the leaders amongst your workforce, and who are the ones most likely to be resistant to change? Again, understanding motivations and personalities helps. Use the key influencers within the business to bring other staff along and continue to show environmental leadership from the top of the business. There's a difference between awareness of an issue and changing your behaviour to address that issue. Just being aware of an issue like climate change rarely leads to a change in behaviour. There's usually another motivating factor behind behaviour change. Find those motivational factors. It's the key to changing behaviour. Cost is one of the main motivations for change, but your staff aren't the ones paying the energy bills, so there's little incentive for them to change their behaviour to reduce energy use in the workplace, for example. Everyone will have different motivations, so there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Different people are motivated by different things. For example, finance managers would be motivated by profitability or saving money. So use profits and payback to promote carbon saving projects to them. Sales staff would be motivated by incentives and making their jobs easier. Green credentials and improved business reputation can make it easier to sell to customers. Other staff want to work for companies that are sustainable. Many people care about the environment, and it's a way of retaining and gaining new staff. Carrot and stick motivation is a motivational approach that involves offering a carrot or a reward for good behaviour and a stick, a negative consequence for poor behaviour. Businesses can be rewarded financially by reducing carbon and costs, or they will be penalised by not complying with environmental laws. Personal motivation is a benefit to an individual, in this case to their chosen charity. An ethical motivation is a benefit to others, here helping sea life by reducing plastic waste. Corporate image motivation, for example. In a green company, staff are proud and happy working for a company which protects the environment. Externally, customers choose us as a supplier because we're a green business. Many tenders now require potential suppliers to have carbon reduction plans in place. Different people will have different values, incentives and goals. You may be able to identify some members of your staff as either settlers, prospectors or pioneers. Settlers are motivated by safety, security and the need to belong. These are people who may be resistant to change, but they also don't like to be left out. They like to go with the majority. Prospectors are motivated by success, self-esteem and the esteem of others. These are the people who enjoy competitions and strive to be the best. And pioneers are motivated by ethics, ideas, exploring and innovating. Pioneers are likely to be the first to sign up to a new scheme. They aren't afraid of change and they're happy to come up with new ideas for improvement. Here are some ideas for motivating these different types of staff. For settlers, everyone else is part of the green team. You should join in. Prospectors will announce the successes each month. The person who's made the best improvement wins a prize. And for pioneers, we want your ideas on how to make a difference and help the business to stand out from the crowd. What are common challenges to engaging staff in sustainability projects? A lack of awareness that there is an issue. Whose responsibility is it? Mine or someone else's? Am I allowed to do something about it? Staff may think of unintended consequences, such as, will the cleaner be working in the dark if lighting controls are put in place? There can be inconvenience as well, adding extra work or time to ensure equipment and lights are turned off. And old habits die hard. This is the way we've always done things. To answer these challenges, you need clear communication, an understanding of what constrains or motivates staff to operate differently. You need to provide support and leadership. Proportionality, how important is it? Is it valuable to the business? And give it a suitable focus. Understand that different incentives work differently for different people. And try taking small steps. Don't try to do everything at once. Communicating changes to your business by framing the change that you want Make it appropriate to your company and appropriate to the size and scale of the project or change. Get staff buy-in, consult with your workforce rather than giving orders, and listen to any concerns. Explain the reasons behind the change and the benefits to staff and the business. And think about, how do you communicate change and how effective is that? Should you consider a different way of communicating? Some ideas to get you started. I'll get suggestions, for example, with a staff survey or quiz. Gather a team together and appoint champions and start meeting as a team. Identify the key issues and prioritise the issues and actions that are needed. And decide what actions need to be taken and when. Think about measuring success. The timescale for impacts depends on the measures proposed. Visible signs can indicate early effectiveness and future slippage. Are the lights on or off? Regular monitoring and feedback to teams is essential, and the long-term performance impact should be reported and shared. Continue to look for opportunities to add ideas and suggestions. Some companies find rewards useful for suggestion schemes. And be realistic about what you can control and what you can't, what you can influence and what you can't influence. So looking now at how to maintain your workforce's enthusiasm for sustainability and the environment. Cutting carbon and costs in a business can be a long-term activity. So consistent attention and commitment from business leaders is essential. Resources must be seen as valuable. So provide staff with the time and resources needed. You will be rewarded. Identify the key points where intervention will be useful, such as changing business activities and processes to include sustainability. Reporting procedures should include the business commitment and reporting successes. And for new starts or job changes, training on sustainability should be included at induction. Reinforce the benefits with regular feedback and be quick to respond to change. You could also consider writing environmental responsibilities into job role descriptions. This can be specific to the job role or general statements on the business values, which include environmental considerations. Well, that concludes my part in the session. I'll now hand you over to Bex to talk about environmental policies.
Thank you, Carl. So this second part of the workshop is just going to go through what an environmental policy is, why you should have an environmental policy, and then sort of a structure of what you should be included within your environmental policy. If you do already have an environmental policy, the offer from our part is, if you'd like to send that over to us, we can have a review of it and give you some feedback on that. But that will follow up with the slide deck. So what is an environmental policy? So writing an environmental policy is your way of making a statement of intent for your business that formally communicates your intentions with regards to environmental issues and performance. It showcases that you have an understanding of your business's significant environmental impacts and areas where you have the highest carbon footprint, but also where you have started to take actions to mitigate. So, as Carl mentioned earlier, you may need an environmental policy because it's part of a requirement from a customer, or you need one for a pre-qualification questionnaire or a tender submission. So if anyone in the room has ISO 14001, they'll also know that an environmental policy is a key requirement of this standard. So why should you have an environmental policy? So it gives you a better understanding of your company's environmental impact. It gives you building blocks for meaningful, measurable environmental improvement, which is appropriate to your business size and type. So without having a baseline, how can improvement measures be made? And also, how can the things that you implement within your organization, how can the successes also be measured? So it's really important in that sense. It also demonstrates to staff that you're serious about environmental issues. And from your stakeholders' perspective, it communicates that you're serious about environmental issues and performance. Whereas within our teams, we're seeing more that this used to be a bit of a nice to have, but it is moving towards that must have for organisations. So who cares whether you have an environmental policy? This is essentially anyone who interacts with your company. So if we pick out a few of these with some examples, so your staff would be interested if you have an environmental policy. So there is a consultancy called Anthesis, and they found in a survey of over 1,000 UK workers that 53% said sustainability was an important factor when choosing a company to work for. Customers also care if you have an environmental policy. Again, another survey by Deloitte in March 2021, they found that nearly a third of consumers claimed to have stopped purchasing certain brands or products because they had ethical or sustainability related concerns about them. So this just highlights here how sustainability is becoming more important to consumers and where they choose to spend their money. In a similar vein, potential customers. So as I just mentioned earlier, the public procurement notifications. So this is where contracts require you to have environmental policies or environmental credentials. Another example here is investors. So I'm sure you've heard the word of the ESG, that sort of phrase flying around. And this means that investing without any consideration of environmental, social, or governance is becoming increasingly less acceptable. Within Greater Manchester, we have a carbon neutral target of 2038. So I'm sure there is an interest there from a local authority perspective if you have an environmental policy. Very importantly, local residents that may be cited around your organisation, they will want to see that issues associated with vibrations, noise and light are addressed within your environmental policy. And just another one here to pick out is regulator. So it ensures that a company is compliant with legislation and that this is addressed in your environmental policy. So here are a few examples of how a good environmental policy can help relationships with your staff, your regulators, and also your customers. So in terms of from left to right, we have morale and productivity and attracting and retaining staff. From a regulator perspective, there's this legal compliance, better relationships, and therefore fewer visits. And from a customer point of view, this could be a decision-making factor or a requirement, and then again, better relationships. So what should you really include in your environmental policy? And I'm just going to go over now sort of the parts of the environmental policy that should be included. So to start off, we would like to see very clearly as a title that this is an environmental policy statement. We'd want to see that this is branded with your company's logo, etc. And then moving on to sort of an introductory statement. And within this introductory statement, we'd want to see a brief paragraph introducing introducing the company and what areas and who the policy covers. Next, we'd want just a statement of an acknowledgement that the business impacts on the environment. And then we go into this a little bit further with these statements of environmental commitment. Now, these statements of environmental commitment, they'll be comprised of 3 standard commitments that we see across all of the environmental policies and that you expect to see on environmental policies. And then you will include more tailored commitments for your organisation. Next, we would have a commitment to communicate. So how will you communicate? Who will you communicate? Who will communicate it? And where will it be communicated? And then there's also this commitment to review the policy. And again, how, who, and when. Your environmental policy should be signed by the most senior person in the company. So this could be the MD or the owner of the company. And then of course dated and document controlled. So a couple of general comments really on the content. So in terms of an environmental policy, do be clear and use business-like language because, of course, this is a formal document. It's important that you stick to the point and be concise. We expect environmental policies to be no more than in an A4 side. So that just sort of homes in how concise you need to be within this environmental policy. And of course, state your policy. In terms of what you don't really want to include in your environmental policy or the don't side of this. So yes, it is a business document, but do avoid the use of jargon because this is a document that is intended to be understood by everyone. If we look back at when we were talking about stakeholders and who is interested in your environmental policy, it's really important to keep them in mind when you're writing your environmental policy. So you should also make sure that your commitments are realistic, achievable, and that you can evidence them. Well, you should, but also you should not give specific targets. So this policy really is an overview of your commitments. So specific numerical or percent targets should be put in your action plan instead. So think of it as a cover sheet for your environmental plans. Your environmental policy is somewhat your high-level summary, and then your targets sit within your strategy that's behind your environmental plans. And then, of course, this bottom one is do not name your staff and just include job roles. But the reason that we say that is because if you name someone within your organisation and then they leave the organisation, that sort of version becomes redundant, if that makes sense. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 standard commitments which we'd expect to see in any business's environmental policy, and this is regardless of size or sector. So, for example, an organisation is committed to protection of the environment, prevention of pollution, and meeting exceeding compliance obligations. So compliance obligations can be legal compliance obligations, but then they can also be obligations that you have implemented within your organisation. So that could be pledges or memberships. In addition to these 3 commitments, businesses should also add their own commitments, which are specific and relevant to their business activities. So they should be suitable and appropriate. They should be tailored to the nature, scale, and context of the organisation and operations, and also based on your company's environmental aspects and impacts. I appreciate that there might not be people in the room that are understanding what aspects and impacts are. That is something that we do cover in the Journey to Net Zero programme, but it's not something we had time to cover today. But your aspects and your impacts are a very important part of what becomes your environmental policy. So in terms of these specific environmental improvement objectives, if we take a joinery business as an example, you might expect there to be a commitment around using sustainably sourced timber. Or for a haulage company, you'd expect to see commitments of fuel efficiency measures and fleet management. So I am just going to pull out an example here of what a tailored policy commitment might look like. So let's say one of your significant aspects is the use of vans or vehicles for your on-site service. So here are some examples of what your tailored commitments could look like. So you might have a commitment to encourage fuel efficient driver behaviours. There's also this commitment around reducing travel miles through better journey planning from our fleet. And then finally, they could have an aim for all vehicles to be Euro 6 compliant. So when should a policy be reviewed? So we say that it should be part of a cycle of continual improvement, and we believe that an environmental policy should be reviewed at least annually or when there has been substantial changes to the business. So these changes could be moving to a site, adding different products or services, or acquiring a new subsidiary, etc. In a nutshell, that's because your aspects are starting to change, so they should be acknowledged within your environmental policy. Also, if you think that there's been so much change in the past 2 years, probably coming on to 3 years now for most of us, whereas employees have been working from home, and this may have reduced your office heating emissions and also your commuting issues. So again, this would be considered a business circumstances significantly changing. And also, we suggest that this policy should be reviewed when your objectives have also been achieved. So, what should you do with your environmental policy? Your environmental policy really should be available to anyone that asks, and so some good options are to post it on your website. But just be careful if you are going to post it on your website to make sure it's the most up-to-date version and that no other old versions can come up in your Google search. You might also think to put it in your reception area, your staff handbook, or your induction pack on the intranet, and also including your environmental policy within your staff awareness training. So emphasising your environmental policy within your staff handbook and during the induction process, and also on your staff intranet if you have one, can all help with the staff engagement side of this, which Carl was discussing earlier. And also, you should really look at your environmental policy as a living, breathing document, not just something that, you write up to tick a box and then it goes in a bottom drawer and you don't think about it until, sometimes we see that organizations forget they've even got an environmental policy. So just to say, do continue to revisit your environmental policy and include it within your staff meetings, briefing sessions, toolbox talks, and any training, and it'll just sort of emphasize that sustainability is at the forefront of your mind as an organization. And that concludes this session. We have our fourth and final session on Thursday, the 1st of December at 11 o'clock. And this is going to be around using sustainability for competitive advantage. If anyone does have any questions now, I think you might be able to shout out, and we do. I'd like to be shouted at in this sense. But if you don't feel like you want to shout out, do drop it in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them now. But of course, if you do have any questions that comes up after this, feel free to drop myself or Carl or anyone from the Skills for Growth team an email and they can pass it on to us. And again, my initial sort of not ask from you, but our offer, if you do have an environmental policy and you can send it over to us and we'll have a little look over that and make sure it's hitting the marks in terms of that structure and that content that we just went through then. If not,
No.
I think that's the end. Have you got anything to add there, Carl?
No, I think it was very nicely covered. Obviously, people are either too shy or we covered it in enough depth for everybody. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yes,
and
thank
hopefully
you.
we'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you. I think that's just us now left, isn't it?
It's just us, yeah.
Yeah.